The spirit needs to talk to you! Who are you? Damn commercial!
About a month ago, a trailer for a little Shudder flick called Late Night with the Devil popped up on my YouTube recommendation, and I skipped along because it didn't catch my interest at first. But then a little bit later, I got sent the trailer by a friend who told me to watch it, and so I was like, alright, I'll check it out. And yeah, I accepted defeat and admitted that looked pretty rad. So a couple weeks ago, we all went out to check it out, and I figured this would make a good video since there's a lot to go over with this movie. I might get some heat for this, but a lot of people were calling this a found footage horror film, and then I saw a lot of people coming out of the film very confused as to what to call it, because they weren't able to classify it as found footage after seeing it. But right when this movie started, I knew, this is a full-length analog horror movie. I mean, come on, the unaired episode, interference with the cameras, it just seems to fit more into the analog horror genre than anything else. And when I saw complaints that this just felt like an elongated episode of TV, is when it kind of set in that it's analog, because not everyone is so down with analog horror as we know. For anyone who hasn't already seen Late Night with the Devil, I do recommend giving it a watch because this video is going to be full of spoilers. But before I let you get too far, just wanted to say if you're new here and enjoy what you're watching, be sure to hit all those neat buttons down below, including the subscribe and bell notification so you can be a part of every new upload. Also, real quick, just wanted to mention that as of this moment, me and some others are going to be at Phoenix Fan Fusion all 3 days, May 24th through the 26th. Not affiliated with the event in any ways, just going to have a fun time, so if any of you already have tickets or are planning on it, you might see some familiar faces. There will more than likely be more info and details as the convention gets closer, but anyways, now you can pass through. Our movie begins in good old 70s America, where on April 4th, 1971, the first episode of Night Owls premiered on UBC, with the hopes of it being a huge late-night success on the shoulders of the host Jack Delroy. Right off the bat, David Dastmalchian is an absolute class act. I first saw him in his Ant-Man roles, where I thought he was really funny, and he was also hilarious in the Suicide Squad. But I feel like this movie right here showed that this man can do anything. He has his co-host, Gus McConnell, and it really looks like this show has been successfully entertaining audiences. He even signed a 5-year deal with UBC in 1972. We are then introduced to Jack's wife, Madeline Piper, who is said to be one of Jack's biggest supporters in hitting the #1 spot. Except it sounds like he has a second source of support from somewhere much less inviting. Jack has an affiliation with The Grove, which is described as a men-only club in the Redwoods of California, and given its weird, ominous description, has succumbed to many rumors throughout the years. It was established in the 1800s and has housed many big politicians, celebrities, leaders, you name it. It's just a fun summer camp for the rich and powerful, as our narrator describes. Yeah, it looks like a really fun summer camp. Rumors consistently spread of these archaic rituals taking place, and also the Grove's strange ability to make or break careers. It unfortunately sounds like even after 4 seasons on air, Night Owls is still failing to beat the #1 spot, held by Johnny Carson. He's getting all these nominations, but he isn't getting trophies. To make matters even worse for Jack, in 1976, Madeline, who is a non-smoker, gets diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. This results in a special episode of Night Owls where Madeline appears as a guest. It's the highest rated episode in Night Owls history, yet still isn't enough to beat Carson. And in 2 short weeks, Madeline passes away. After the tragic passing, Jack goes dark, leaves New York, and isn't heard from until only a month later, where UBC announces the return of Night Owls. Still falling behind from the #1 spot, Jack and his producer go out of their way to kind of drum up some controversy to try and boost numbers. This clearly doesn't go well, and the numbers just keep going down. And with Jack's contract almost up, he's going to have to do something quite spectacular to be able to stay in showbiz. It's possible he's able to do just that because he believes the special he has planned in October of 1977 will be what saves him from the trenches. We are told that what we are about to witness is the recently discovered episode that was aired that night on the show, including some extra behind-the-scenes footage. Now if that doesn't scream analog horror plot, I don't know what will. Now that our long introduction to the plot is out of the way, it's time for Late Night with the Devil. Our episode starts and we are shown off the guests that will be presented for the show. We get to look forward to Christu, Carmichael Haig, and Dr. June Ross Mitchell with Lily, the subject of her new book, Conversations with the Devil. This can only go down a path of good, right? Jack gets introduced and he pulls a little funny joke on Gus, and the stage is set for what is supposed to be a killer show. Jack goes on to tell a few jokes and even gives a little moment of sentiment for his audience. He mentions that interest in the occult has seen a recent revival, talking about how psychics and exorcists are all over the news. Movies like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby had already been out by this point, so it's no wonder these things saw such a huge interest. This leads us right into our first guest, Christu, who is said to be a psychic. He lets everyone know that this very night on Halloween is the last night spirits can attempt to attend to any unfinished business, drawing it all the way back to why we wear Halloween masks, to hide from the angry spirits. It's hard to tell if this guy is legit or just a phony, especially given how far-fetched some of his readings seem, especially with this guy and his ex, where his wife's maiden name is Peterman. After that little fumble, he manages to talk to these two ladies in the audience, and seems to manage to prove his ability live on television, managing to connect this mother and daughter with their dead relative's suicide, even going so far as to read the name of his old toy. The moment comes across as very real and sincere. Jack Delroy is seemingly amazed. While trying to cut to break, it appears that Christu begins getting a very intense reading. And this scene is tense, let me tell you.
One of the old friends of our show who always...
Something very intense here. I'm getting the name Minnie.
He says he keeps hearing the name Minnie, and no one seems to be able to connect. The scene continues to get more and more dreadful. He says he sees an unmarried man with a wedding ring as his eyes roll back and the lights flicker out. Once the lights come back, Christu claims the spirit is gone, and Jack sends the program to break. Everyone is clearly a little put off by what just happened. This next scene we get takes us outside of the show and more into the behind-the-scenes footage. There's been some complaints about how this movie tries to hold itself as found footage, yet these segments seem to break out of that. I mean, what are the odds that they would be mic'd up to this other camera that is coincidentally capturing these plot-important moments taking place in the background? This is honestly just one of those moments where I just didn't think about it all that much. I actually thought it was really cool when we later saw the two scenes side by side to resemble some old Telecaster screens. I thought it was neat and just didn't think too hard about the realism, I guess, given the context of the movies. From behind the scenes, we hear that Gus is a little worried about something other crew members had heard backstage. Something about a little thing Jack and the producer had cooked up for when the girl comes on. Jack says they are just sticking to the regular plan, but Gus claims he is seeing restraints and knives backstage, which would probably spook anybody. We're introduced to the producer named Leo, who comes across as your very stereotypical producer asshole. Jack says Leo's idea to flash the lights was a good idea, even though it's clear then that no one planned for that. It's also clear that Jack was pretty spooked as well by that last incident. But the break is almost over, and it's time for Jack to get back on set. Christu doesn't seem to be feeling any better from the moment he had earlier. For this next segment, Carmichael Haig, a renowned skeptic and hypnotist, is brought out to try and disprove Christu's psychic ability. This guy is as annoying as skeptics can be, but he does have some talent, and that unfortunately works to consistently make me reluctantly believe him. He doesn't seem to not believe in the paranormal, but he believes that everyone who is claiming to be psychic or a medium of some sorts is full of phony baloney. We even get a little Ed and Lorraine Warren name drop. Needless to say, Carmichael is on a mission to expose these swindlers. He is even offering a check of $100,000 to anyone who can provide irrefutable proof of their claims. All this down talk about Christu's abilities are clearly causing some kind of negative reaction. They continue to spout back and forth with each other until Christu has had enough. He stands up and throws water in his face and goes to leave the stage. The doors don't open, so he doesn't end up going far, but Jack stands up and makes quite the confession. As it turns out, the spirit Minnie that Christu was referring to earlier was meant for Jack, an unmarried man with a wedding ring. Carmichael is still not impressed and continues to talk about how statistically, most people in the audience are also wearing wedding rings. He even ups the check to $500,000. This rant doesn't last for much longer as Christu falls to the floor and projectile vomits all the way over to hit Carmichael. A wicked shot, I must say. Right before we cut to commercial, Christu shoots out his guts all over the camera. We go back to behind the scenes footage as a lady rushes out and helps Christu up and out of the area. Gus tries to keep the audience calm, and Carmichael still thinks it's all just an act. An explanation for everything this guy supposedly has. Carmichael continues to press Jack over how Christu could have known about Madeline's secret nickname, and it also sounds like he has an ulterior motive as he asks Jack to help get him into the Grove, that weird cult group with all the crazy rich people. Dr. June arrives on set, but before her and Jack can talk, it's time for the show to continue. During the air, we can hear an ambulance siren going off in the back. Sounds like poor Christu is having a hard time recovering. But it's the moment we've all been waiting for, as Jack is about to introduce Dr. June and Lily. We get played a clip from Dr. June, really just going over the history behind Lily and what led to her being possessed. We learn about the first church of Abraxas, hidden to look just like a regular home. This is definitely shown to be quite the sinister cult, consistently sacrificing children, and it's said that anyone who witnesses these rituals will be under Abraxas' bidding. In August 1974, federal agents laid siege to the house, but in response, all individuals within the church set the building and themselves on fire. Somehow, some way, a 10-year-old girl is discovered amongst the rubble, and this is where we are introduced to Lily. Now the real question is, did she survive just due to luck, or was this all a part of the church's master plan? This is where Dr. June and her team came in. Apparently, no one was able to explain the strange behaviors being displayed by Lily and needed outside assistance from in that field. We get to listen in on an audio recording that contains the first session between June and Lily. When asked if she is talking to the demon Abraxas, well, some not good things happen. The clip ends and we return to the show. Dr. June and Lily are called out and Lily immediately exhibits that strange behavior. Even the cameras seem to get affected by her. She also loves to stare deeply into our souls. Lily also brings up Madeline's death and almost seems to try and connect with him in a moment that feels almost sincere. But after a bit of back and forth between Jack and his guests, it's time for our next break. You don't have to keep staring at me like that. During our break, Jack makes mention that it's time for them to all look pretty again, but that sparks an interesting reaction out of Lily. It sounds like she was speaking with Madeline's voice there for a second. Could just be the wind tricking us, no big deal. Dr. June pulls Jack aside to talk and is starting to have second thoughts about continuing with the segment. June talks about how she went into a fugue state and would only repeat Jack's name. This doesn't seem to bother Jack at all, and he still wants to continue on with the show. There does also seem to be some hidden history potentially between our two characters here. Something is definitely going on that we don't know about. Dr. June goes to attend to Lily and Leo pulls Jack aside to give us some harrowing news. Christu died on his way to the hospital. This seems to actually get a reaction out of Jack, but he still doesn't want the crew to know as Gus is already spooked. Off to the side, we hear Carmichael talking to the two ladies that Christu had the psychic connection with. Apparently, the same lady who ran out to help Christu off the floor also asked these two some questions before the show started. See, I don't want this guy to be right, but he's making a convincing argument. The break is over and the show is back on, and things are just getting more and more uneasy as this goes on. You can feel the tension being felt by just the people on the show. Poor Gus should just get out of there while he can. Carmichael and Dr. June start to bicker back and forth before Jack gets the show back on track. June goes on to explain her findings and what she has been researching, talking about how she believes Lily is a victim of psychic infestation, which is just a nice way of saying possessed. When asked if it's the demon Abraxas, June explains that she actually believes it's a lower demon that serves Abraxas. Carmichael tries to continue shutting her down, but she hits him right back that he has just closed his mind off to what he doesn't understand. While showing off some items from Dr. June's private collection, Carmichael thinks this little bit would be a funny prank. Luckily, only some people in the audience seem to fall for it. After that failed stunt, we go back to Lily, who tells us she has her own name for the entity inside her. Mr. Wriggles is the lovely name and says it's because he wriggles his way inside and out of her head. That isn't haunting in the slightest. However, interrupting their conversation, it sounds like the audio begins to go off the fritz. Gus even gets shocked by the metal by his stand. The glass around the set begins to shatter. Something paranormal must be taking place. Carmichael gets up and yanks a cord out of the stand and claims that the sound was feeding back through the PA system, hence creating the awful noise and reaction. Once again, an explanation for everything. Lily claims it was in fact Mr. Wriggles who pulled the stunt. This sparks an idea in Jack's head. He wants to invite Mr. Wriggles onto the show. Dr. June is obviously very against the idea, but Carmichael says he's willing to give up his $500,000 still. The audience also doesn't help and proceeds to convince June to agree to give a brief demonstration. We cut to break and Dr. June is pretty pissed off that she was ambushed live on TV. Her and Lily go to start setting things up as Gus pulls Jack aside yet again for another talk. Gus is now straight up telling Jack that things will go sideways if he continues. Jack lets him know that if things do end up going sideways, Gus is more than welcome to leave whenever for safety. This obviously confuses Gus, as just earlier in the film it seemed that the Christu incident really had him shaken up, so why would he want to continue on even further with this live possession? But unfortunately, it seems like Jack has only started thinking about the show and its ratings. He sees this as an opportunity that he isn't going to let slide. Gus reveals that he knows about Christu's death, and the rest of the crew are equally as scared as him. Things get a bit heated as it's clear Jack is falling more and more to the side of not really caring, but Gus still holds out hope for the good in him. Lily is restrained, and the show is ready to be back on. If tensions weren't high before, they certainly are now. Jack comes out and introduces the demonstration, and the show begins. Dr. June reassures the audience that they aren't in any danger, so even if what they see scares them, they must stay calm so as to not distract Lily. Dr. June instructs Lily to close her eyes and to let herself sleep. She then asks if she can speak to Mr. Wriggles. Nothing seems to happen at first, but very abruptly something starts to change. Lily starts to shake around a bit, as if in the possession process. She looks up, and it's almost a whole different face and voice.
You know who I am, Doctor.
Please.
This scene was particularly very interesting. It was fascinating to see this demon almost in a state of fear and confusion when they notice there is an audience and everything is on set. This demon would literally have no idea what anything is around them, whether or not this is a manipulation tactic or it's genuine confusion. But once she realizes Jack is here, the whole demeanor changes.
I don't believe we've been acquainted.
Don't be a fool. We go way back.
Talking about how this demon and Jack go way back, when they met amongst the tall trees. We even see a face glitch in behind her head for a brief frame. Dr. June tries to bring Lily back, but this demon starts spilling the beans on Dr. June and Jack's relationship. Not without saying some pretty horrific stuff about his dead wife too. You know, classic demon stuff.
Be careful now. You know what happened to his last whore? So now you can screw whoever you want, like Dr. June.
The demon continues to egg June on, resulting in her losing her control and slapping her. Dr. June immediately regrets her decision, but it's still the demon in control. Nothing the doctor is doing seems to be working, and Lily turns to Jack and begins to speak in Madeline's voice yet again as electricity starts to shoot around the ceiling. The chair Lily is sitting on begins to lift up. Once the chair falls, Lily comes back. I'm sure Carmichael is going to find some way to call this a hoax. Given that intense on-air moment, we cut to break. Once off the air, the whole environment in the set has changed. Jack, in his way with words, is able to calm down Dr. June, but in this next bit, Jack goes and grabs the sacrificial dagger to cut the straps off of Lily. And let me tell you, from that moment on, my eyes were locked onto where that dagger was at all times. Gus runs over to Leo, who just gets off the phone, and Gus again tries to talk these people out of what they're doing. Leo immediately shuts it down, and Gus reluctantly complies. But as Carmichael and Gus walk past each other, I can't tell if Carmichael is still being an asshole here, or if he is genuinely trying to calm Gus down by saying none of it is real. But Gus isn't having any of it, and informs Carmichael about Christu's passing. This seems to be the one thing to actually befuddle Carmichael. He seems to have some trouble coming up with a reason for this. Before the break ends, Leo pulls Jack aside and lets him in on some good and bad news. Bad news is that 3 members of the crew have already walked off, but the good news is that higher-ups are already calling this one of the biggest TV events in history. Looks like Jack is on his way to living the dream. It also sounds like Dr. June is being eyed up as well for frequent reoccurrences. It does sound like, however, the moment Lily replicated Madeline's voice continues to really stick with Jack, and Leo tries to immediately bring him away from getting too afraid. Leo tells him that this is what Madeline would want, and Jack is back on. The break is over, and that sacrificial dagger is sitting awfully close to Lily. Jack issues an apology for those that may have been disturbed, but Lily is able to reassure everyone that she is alright. When trying to describe her recollection, she says it's like being asleep and awake at the same time, but it's time for Carmichael to interject. He actually goes so far as to accuse Dr. June of taking advantage of Lily, damaging her mentality by these continued hypnosis acts. Dr. June reminds everyone from where she found Lily, in the rubbles of that church, but Carmichael is not backing down. He still is claiming it's all hypnosis. Jack gives him a piece of his mind, calling him out that all he is doing is coming up with nonsense so that he doesn't have to give up his check and admit defeat. Carmichael takes this personally and goes to demonstrate his thesis, pulling up Gus as his volunteer. Gus and Carmichael sit across from each other, and fog begins to come up from the floor. He pulls out a pocket watch and in classic hypnosis fashion, talks slowly and asks Gus to stare into the spiral. It is at this point, Gus is in a complete hypnotic state. Carmichael puts away the pocket watch and asks him about his fear of worms. This continues to escalate when Gus starts to sweat excessively. Then we can see this gash on the side of his neck. In this gruesome segment, we watch as Gus starts to peel off his neck to find an abundance of worms coming out from inside him. Carmichael tells him to stay calm, but Gus claims they are all inside him. He quickly takes off his suit and rips open his stomach to reveal a shocking amount of worms, to say the least. This is when it felt like Carmichael almost had me. He winks at the camera and then snaps his finger to seemingly try and pull Gus out of his trance, but nothing happens. Carmichael stands up and truly doesn't appear to know what's going on. A huge worm shoots out of Gus's eye, and honestly, these effects are impeccable, definitely reminiscent of The Thing. We see as Lily laughs hysterically in the back. Did Mr. Wriggles do this? But with 3 simple words, dreamer, here, awake, Carmichael pulls Gus out of the trance, as it was all a part of the act. God damn you, Carmichael. Gus looks around confused and a little embarrassed after he sees himself with his suit opened up. It seems like Carmichael was not only able to hypnotize Gus, but most of the people in the audience. This does not look too good for Dr. June if Carmichael was able to make something so realistic to so many people. But here's the twist. When Carmichael plays back the footage, we can see clearly that nothing is actually happening. In fact, it's rather goofy looking to see everyone's visceral reactions. This seems to be the end of things, but Lily says what we're all thinking. Play back the tape with Lily's possession. Dr. June does not want to participate and also doesn't really want Lily to see what it looks like. But Jack ignores this request and wants to continue the tape anyways. Dr. June gets up to leave, but Lily is able to convince her to stay. When the tape plays, we can see clear as day the possession taking place. Carmichael seems to be actually taken aback, saying he will need the tapes to be examined, but as the tape continues, Jack notices the face that glitches in. Just like my job, he pauses the tape frame by frame to see if he can pinpoint what he saw. It looks like for a brief frame we actually see a bit of the Grove, but then it's not the face that appears on the tape, but Madeline in full ghost form standing behind Jack. We can visibly see this rock Jack's world for a moment. Instead of changing Carmichael's mind, it actually makes him believe that Jack had set the whole thing up, and to be honest, there's a part of me that doesn't blame him for thinking that. Carmichael is still trying to put everything together in his head, but something begins to go wrong with Lily. It looks like electricity is starting to form around her. When Jack tries to touch her arm, he gets shocked and all the lights go off. This, ladies and gentlemen, is when things get a little bonkers. The lights flash back on and we see 2 different points of electricity pulling from Lily, ripping her head in 2 to reveal this truly horrific creature design. Gus runs up to try and expel the demon, but his neck is immediately snapped backwards. Dr. June tries to bring Lily back, but she gets strung up by her necklace and hung in the air. Jack gets thrown back, and Carmichael, in a hilarious scene, gets on his knees to pledge his worship, but after seeing June get her neck slit open by the necklace, he gives his last offer with the $500,000 check. In quite a satisfying moment, Carmichael gets fried from the inside and burns to a crisp. Leo runs in and pulls Jack backstage as the Lily pulls the camera towards her. The screen cuts to static and we see a face form from within. What the hell was that? We cut from the station difficulties frame and we're back on the show. Gus introduces Jack and just like us, Jack is incredibly confused. He looks around as the whole framing of the movie changes up. Now in widescreen, everyone in the audience goes silent and stares at Jack. He blinks and he's in another episode doing one of his skits. It's clear he's in some kind of limbo state. Jack walks off set and we get a segment where this guest on Jack's show pulls out the worm that jumped out of Gus's eye. Then we see him brought back to his interview with Madeline. We're then shown the same station difficulties frame, except it quickly begins to melt over. Back to the show, we see Gus and a guest spin a wheel with resemblance to the hypnotic spiral. Jack walks up towards the camera and yells at everyone to turn off the TV before we are flashed with a multitude of quick frames. A quick flash of Jack and Madeline in front of the spiral, someone who I believe was the leader of the Abraxas Church, a frightening image of Lily in full demon form, and a return to the small trees. We're then back in UBC Studios, as Jack is signing his contract. An interviewer asks yet again what he had to sacrifice to get here, to which the head man next to him says his greatest sacrifice is yet to come. Two people dressed in white robes give him a glass and walk him out onto the set. We see the church leader come out and lead Jack towards an owl-masked man. Everyone starts to make animal noises as Jack drinks from the cup. You know, your usual cult nonsense. When the camera pans back around, we see Madeline laying in her bed, hooked up to all the machinery keeping her alive, while Jack slowly goes in to speak to her. The conversation reveals that Jack went to the Grove in order to strike up a deal for fame and fortune, to be number one. Not only did he have to sell his soul, but Minnie's life as well. Jack claims to not have known that they would have done anything to her, but she says that his soul still belongs to them. Jack breaks down and tells her that he loves her, to which she tells him basically that if he loves her, then to put her out of her misery. The camera then pans towards the sacrificial dagger. Uh-oh. Minnie cries out in pain as Jack holds her. She yells at him to do it. Jack slowly goes to pick up the dagger and stabs her. Jack then wakes up to realize he is still on his actual set and had actually stabbed Lily instead. We see everyone dead from the previous attack, as Jack just repeats, "Dreamer, here, awake," clearly thinking he is still in some kind of trance. Sirens can be heard from the back as Jack continues to repeat over and over again. Then the camera cuts out, and our movie ends. I truly think it was a solid horror flick, and it again goes to show that indie is more likely than not where it's at. This film managed to create these very dynamic characters that were so unlikable and likable at the same time. For the first half, Carmichael is this huge asshole skeptic you constantly disagree with. But then in the second half, he is still a huge asshole skeptic, but you start to almost reluctantly agree with him after his whole stunt with Gus. Gus was truly the audience within a character, as I'm sure every one of us felt the same way he did. Stop all this nonsense and get the fuck out. From what I can gather as well, it was said that witnesses of the sacrifice to Abraxas would be under his influence, and by killing Lily, I believe Jack successfully completed the ritual, and the whole world was able to view it live on television. It's unclear who the true mastermind behind all of this was, but it's clear that in the end, Jack may have gotten what he wanted, just not necessarily how he wanted it. Is it possible that Lily and Mr. Wriggles were able to learn how Carmichael hypnotized people, and that's how Jack winds up in this weird state at the end where he views himself killing Minnie? Who's to say, but I would still argue this film is borderline analog horror. The demon creature even looks like this analog horror design from hell itself. Horror is, and will continue to be, the most expansive and creative genre in the industry, as I can't imagine any other genre of film working in this format. Huge props to all the hard work involved behind the scenes of this film, as I believe it came out incredibly well, even though I still squint my eyes whenever those AI intro cards appear. Overall, I do highly recommend Late Night with the Devil if you watched this without seeing it, and if you did make it all the way to the end of this video, I do thank you for watching. Be sure to hit all those neat buttons down below, and leave me some recommendations down below on what else you would like me to check out. But other than that, I need to go complete my ritual for Lord Abraxas real quick.